Hello students, I'm going to read Rain, Rain, Go Away by Isaac Asimov. There she is again, George, said Lillian Wright as she looked out the window. Who? Asked her husband, trying to watch the baseball game on TV. Mrs. Sicaro, she said, the new neighbor. Oh, I wonder where her boy is. He's a nice boy. I wish Tommy would make friends with him. It's hard with the Sicaros. They keep to themselves. I don't even know what Mr. Sicaro does for a living. Mrs. Sicaro knows what Mr. Sicaro does for a living. Maybe she's upset because she doesn't know what I do. Oh, George, Lillian glanced with distaste at the television. I think we should make an effort to be friendly. But she's so odd. She's always looking at the sky, and she's never been out when it's the least bit cloudy. Once, when the boy was out playing, she had him come in, shouting that it was going to rain. But it was perfectly sunny. Did it rain, eventually? Of course not. Lillian went back to the window and said, Oh, look at that, George. George looked at nothing but the TV. Lillian said, I know she's staring at that cloud. 2 days later, Lillian told George excitedly, We're going out with the Sicaros to Murphy's Park. How did it happen? I just went up to their house this morning and rang the bell. That easy? It wasn't easy. It was hard. I stood there, jittering with my finger on the doorbell. And she didn't kick you out? No, she invited me in and said she was so glad I had come. Did she agree to come with us right away? Well, not right away. She asked her husband what the weather forecast was, and he said that the newspapers all said it would be fair tomorrow. All the newspapers said so, eh? I think they get all the newspapers. At least I've watched the bundle of newsboy. At least I've watched the bundle that the newsboy leaves. Anyway, she called up the Weather Bureau and had them give her the latest report. She said they'd go, unless there were any unexpected changes in the weather. All right, then we'll go. The Sicaros were young and handsome. As they walked to the Wrights' car, George leaned towards his wife and whispered, So he's the reason you are so interested in them. I wish he were, said Lillian. Is that a handbag he's carrying? Pocket radio, to listen to the weather forecasts, I bet. The Sicaro boy followed. He carried a barometer. All three got into the back seat. It was a beautiful day at Murphy's Park. Lillian took the two boys to the amusement section and bought tickets to every ride. When she returned, George was alone. Where? She began. At the refreshment stand. I told them I'd wait for you, and we would join them. He sounded gloomy. Anything wrong? No, except that I think he must be independently wealthy. What? I don't know what he does for a living. He just said that he's a student of human nature. That would explain all those newspapers. Yes, but with a handsome, wealthy man next door, it looks as though I'll have impossible standards set for me. Don't be silly. Come on, they're waving. Oh, look what they've brought. Look what they've bought, excuse me. The Sicaros were each holding 3 sticks of cotton candy, huge swirls of pink threads of sugar dried out of syrup. It melted sweetly in the mouth and left one feeling sticky. The Sicaros held one out to each Wright, and the Wrights accepted. The adults played darts and a poker game. The boys went on more rides. The Sicaros ate several more cotton candy sticks. George and Lillian walked slowly behind the group. If I see them eat another cotton candy stick, said George, I'll turn green and sicken on the spot. They've had a dozen each. I suppose they've never had cotton candy before, and they need to adjust to the novelty. They'll fill up on it and then never eat it again. Well, maybe. They strolled towards the Sicaros. You know, Lil, it's clouding up. Suddenly, all 3 Sicaros ran to George and begged to go home. It looked stormy. Mrs. Sicaro wailed that all the forecasts had been for fair weather. George tried to console them. Even if a storm were to come, it wouldn't last more than half an hour. The drive back seemed very long. There was no conversation. Mr. Sicaro's radio was quite loud. Weather reports mentioned local thunder showers. The Sicaro youngster piped up that the barometer was falling, and Mrs. Sicaro stared at the sky. It does look threatening, doesn't it? Lillian said to be polite. But then George heard her mutter quietly, It's only a little bit of rain. A wind had sprung up when they entered their streets, and the leaves rustled ominously. George said, You'll be indoors in 2 minutes, friends. We'll make it. He pulled up to the Sicaro's house. The Sicaros got out, faces filled with tension, and ran towards the door. Honestly, said Lillian, you would think they were... Halfway to the door, the rain started. The Sicaros stopped and looked up despairingly. As the drops hit, their faces blurred and shrank. All three shriveled and sank down into 3 sticky wet heaps. The Wrights stared with horror. Lillian completed her remark. Made of sugar and afraid that they would melt. The end.